Hey everyone, my name is Mike Winters here with Garden, and we're ready to kick off our October community office hours. So I think we can get right to it. So our agenda today, starting off with this introduction, bit of background in case you're new to Garden. Then what we're going to cover is a recent Garden 0.12.7 release, which we released this past Monday, and we're going to focus on a new feature called module templates. And then going to talk a bit about Garden Enterprise as well and share some progress that we've made there. Of course, this is a community office hours, but if you're using Garden, you might be interested to know what's going on with Enterprise. And so like to keep you briefed, and then we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. And first, a quick about Garden, again, just in case you're new to the company. So Garden was founded in 2018, and we're headquartered in Berlin. But of course, we work with users and customers all around the globe. We have a development automation platform for Kubernetes and Cloud Native, both in Open Core and Enterprise Edition. And so that's what we're all about. And if you have questions throughout the webinar, or issues with sound or seeing the screen or whatever the case may be, you can drop in a message in chat or ask us a question. And like I said, we want to save some time for Q&A at the end. So you should see in your Livestorm interface where to do that, just to the right of the presentation. And as for who is on the line today, so our presenters today are Jon, our CEO and a co-founder, and Athor, our CTO and a co-founder. So two of the folks who you probably recognize from the Garden Slack channel, GitHub, and so on and so forth. And so yeah, excited to have them share what's new. And with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Jon.
All right. Yeah. Hello, everybody. So we published a release. I think it was some days ago. My sense of time is completely shot these days. But there was a few small improvements there, some performance improvements. But the big thing was this new feature that basically comes out of a lot of conversations with, especially our most prolific users. We have some users. I think the biggest Garden project we're aware of has something to the tune of 250 modules. So that's a fair amount of complexity. And just kind of looking at how they're doing things, we noticed that there's a fair amount of boilerplate in a single service may include 2, 3, 4 different modules in some cases, and that could be something like you have your container build, potentially more than one even. You might have Kubernetes manifest or a Helm chart. You might have some scripts that you need to run ahead of the build or post, and obviously, it's nice to be able to do that and operate at a fairly low level, but we wanted to come up with a way to abstract some of that away from developers, and also just to be able to factor out the boilerplate that's attached to each and one of your services. And another thing that kind of comes as a side effect of having this many different modules, if you want to make sweeping changes across a large project, that can become a little bit difficult. Say, if you have a bunch of different services and you have a Helm chart or some Kubernetes manifest next to each of them, what if you want to add, a sidecar to all of your services, like one particular thing that needs to be attached to everything? That becomes a little bit tedious if you need to then go into every single service and modify them accordingly. And I think we chose to use YAML for Garden configuration because it's a familiar format, but and I personally think YAML is totally fine as long as there's a sensible amount of it. And in Kubernetes land, sometimes that the amount of YAML you're wrangling every day is not so sensible. So we wanted to do something to help along there. Next slide. Yeah, so I guess I've gotten into this a little bit already, but the idea is that, and I'll show you in a moment how this looks. The idea is that you can define a template that can generate out of just a short well, whatever number of inputs you specify in a schema, generates one or more modules. It's especially useful if you have multiple modules, but even for a single module, maybe you only want to expose, a couple of different parameters for every individual service. That could be what port it exposes, or what's the host name, what's the ingress path, something of the sort, or whatever variables you need for your individual services. There's a lot of flexibility in this, so we don't encode any sort of an opinion on what these variables should be. And the idea being that each service or each component in your project has really only a limited set of configuration parameters, makes it easier for developers to understand, makes it easier to reason about. But under the hood, it works the same way as Garden has worked before. I think it's best to just dive straight into a demo.
All right, I'll stop sharing the screen and let you take it.
Share screen. Here we go. Can you see this?
Yeah, looks good.
Yeah. Okay, great. So here's just like a blank terminal, but so I wanted to show the actual configuration for it. So what I have here is so one of our examples, and you can actually find this particular example that I'll use in the Garden core repo called templated K8s container. And what this example shows is how you can create a template for pretty typical pairing of Garden modules, which is a container module for building an image, and then some Kubernetes manifests that you attach to that. So here we have one directory here, which is just a module, and that contains a bit of code. And then you have a template. And this is usually like you're going to have like 2 or more files here. And how the template looks. So there's a new kind. So you might have noticed you have like in Garden projects, you have kind project, kind module, kind workflow. So this is a module template. I'm naming it K8s container. I point to a path to a JSON schema that describes what inputs this template wants, and I'll get more into that a little bit later. And here are the modules that this template generates. As I mentioned, in this example, we have a container module. And these fields here, this is exactly what you would otherwise put in. So if you just have like a kind module, type, container, name, and so on and so forth. So any fields that are valid in a normal module configuration, you can put here. So we have a container module and a Kubernetes module that basically has some manifests that need that image that we're deploying. So I'll kind of go through these step by step. So notice first, the module name uses parent.name as a prefix. So parent in this case would be the module that references this template. And you can, and basically you kind of have to template the name. In this case, I chose, there's the module name image and module name dash manifest. So you have these two different modules. You need the templating because otherwise, if more than one module uses the same template, you will get a naming conflict. Perhaps one of the more interesting things here is you can generate files as part of a template. So it's not just that you're generating the module configuration for these modules, but you can, any file, you can take a templated source file. Here we have a manifest.yaml file. So this is your typical Kubernetes manifest, like super basic. There's a service and a deployment. But notice that we have Garden template strings in here. So basically, you can use normal Garden template strings. Here we also have the inputs templates. So that I'll show you actually what the module looks like, how you specify these. And this is what you feed into the template specifically when you're referencing it. And then you also have your normal, like here I'm referencing the other module in this in this template. You can notice maybe this is a bit of syntax you might not have noticed before. You can use the bracket notation, and you can do a nested template string here. So we're templating the name of the module and getting that out of the modules object that you have when you're rendering template strings for modules. And so, but this file, like here it's YAML. This could be a Docker file. This could be whatever configuration you want to bundle with your modules that you either want to template or you don't expect to change with every instance of your service. So how you use this template here is just about as simple as it gets. So there's a special module type called templated. You specify the name of the template. You give this module a name, and then you specify the inputs that the template expects. So here, I'm going to go back to the JSON schema that we put in our template. So any JSON object schema, so just standard JSON schema, has to be of type object. And here we're asking the user to specify a container port, service port, and optionally number of replicas. This is pretty arbitrary. We just use something simple for the example. This could be any strings, any nested objects. Garden doesn't mind what you put in there exactly. But we figure it's kind of typical. For a particular type of service, you want to specify the port that it's supposed to expose or where the service is running. But yeah, host names, ingress paths, even Boolean flags to control some behavior. That's all viable as well. Yeah, I mean, it isn't much more complicated than this. So what happens under the hood? So if I now go and deploy this to our testing environment here, expand this a little bit. Sorry, let me do that again. This will basically just deploy this project, which will contain two modules. You see here, I have my service image, and that's the container image, my service manifests. Perhaps one thing of note is that when I ran this, now this file here was generated. So this is the rendered manifest file. Here's that module image reference that I showed you earlier. The inputs have been put in here, so replicas and a container port. And yeah, so Garden doesn't mind like which type of file this is at all. You can template anything like this. We would just suggest that you whatever files that you generate, you put them in your git ignore so that you don't accidentally commit something, because obviously this, for example, this string is going to be different depending on when you run it. Like the module version is going to be different, so you don't want to commit this necessarily to your repository. But your workflows may vary, of course. Yeah, that's kind of the whole gist of it, like how it works. Maybe some more ideas on what you can do with this. So this is a pretty basic combination, like you build an image and then you have instead of having Garden generate your Kubernetes manifest for you, you provide your own Kubernetes manifest. This could obviously also be a Helm chart. You could even generate a Helm chart, or you can reference a Helm chart and just provide values to it. You could have an exec module in there where you run some build script, something before you build the container. We've been seeing people, for example, using Jib to build images. You could do that instead of having the container image build. Sometimes you need to prep something ahead of a build outside of a container. You could put in some other tasks, like you could have a conf test module in there. You could have some linting tasks. Really, whatever you can think of, you can put in there and abstract that from the end user. So the end user would only see something like this, and then this just exposes submodules that just have you would give them these name suffixes or something of that effect. Yeah, I'm wondering, AC, this is something I should mention on top of this?
No, I think that that covers it pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
I guess one question that just sprung up in my mind as I was watching this, is there a reason, because I didn't review the PR, our colleague Thor did that, is there a reason we're syncing the generate files to the source directory as opposed to the .garden/build directory like we sometimes do in the past, just out of curiosity?
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
There is a reason. Yeah, sure. Basically, yeah, we put it in the source directory. There's a few reasons for that. I weighed this myself a little bit. One thing is it's quite common that you would actually need that as part of a build context. So before you want it to be in here before the container module is actually synchronized and to the build staging. So if you, for example, generating a file that, so yeah, I think it's a bigger source of confusion if the file only gets generated in the build staging. I felt it was less intuitive, and I could at the time think of some cases where that could be problematic. For one, it's nice to just be able to see, next to the module directly, here's what I'm going to be building, and not have to dig in here. Although you obviously could, but this doesn't strike me as a particularly convenient way of going about things. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes total sense.
Yeah, I wanted the path of least confusion for this. I tried. I heard a little clicking sound. Was there another question there?
Yes.
Actually, yeah, a question came in about module templates. So someone wrote, my modules rarely have the same amount of something such as ports. Does templating support complex objects or iteration?
Oh, sorry. Can you repeat
sorry,
that?
let me read it more slowly. So my modules rarely have the same amount of something such as ports. Does templating support complex objects or iteration?
So yes, to some degree. So I think if you're doing like very complicated templating for like Kubernetes manifest, for example, you might want to use Helm for it, because that gives you like the full like Go templating syntax, and you can do all kinds of if statements and multi-line stuff. That said, the strings here are actually you can, there is nothing to say that Garden isn't aware that this is a YAML file. So you have a fair amount of flexibility in terms of what you template in. But yeah, I would maybe say if you're like toggling different manifests on and off, we haven't yet gotten our template syntax to the point where we could have like multi-line blocks and functions and the kind of all the, I like to say like Helm is flexible to a fault sometimes, but it is also very flexible. So you might want to use this in combination with, so basically generating Helm charts that then you can do all kinds of complex, you can, drop in, different numbers of containers or ports, or toggle individual documents like YAML resources on and off. For now, that would probably be your best bet.
All right, great. And yeah, just want to say, feel free to drop in questions throughout the webinar. You don't have to wait until the end when we have Q&A time. And they don't even have to be related to what we're talking about. Like with these community office hours webinars, we just kind of dive right in and talk about a couple specific topics. But if it's a more general Garden question, that's the idea is this is a great time to ask those too. So just a general announcement. With that, Aethor, I'll hand it over to you.
Yes, thank you. All right. There you go. All right. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about Garden Enterprise, give you a little update on how we're progressing along there. We did talk about Garden Enterprise a couple of webinars ago, but that was mostly we're just showing a few slides and didn't give a proper demo, which I think we're due for. But to start with, Garden Enterprise is a unified management layer that's built on top of Garden Core and includes centralized environment management, secrets management, user management, and direct integration with VCS. I'll dive a little bit better into these topics in the next few slides, but just to give you a quick overview of kind of the architecture. It runs on-prem in a Kubernetes cluster, and it's kind of like this persistent service that is connected to Garden Core and how you use the core or the CLI in general. So what that means is, if you're just a normal Garden user working from a laptop, you can run Garden login from terminal, from your command line, and then as you use Garden and interact with your project, events and logs and the stuff you're doing gets emitted to Garden Enterprise. Likewise, if you're using Garden from CI, for instance, to build or deploy or run tests, those events or run workflows, those get also sent to Garden Enterprise. And finally, it also integrates directly with your VCS system, such as GitHub or GitLab, which means that if you push your code to say GitHub, Garden Enterprise will receive an event and can respond to that and essentially run workflows on these events. And I'll show you how that looks like in the demo later. But yeah, I mentioned in the previous slide, it had secret management as kind of a built-in feature. So we store secrets securely in Vault that also runs on premise. So you have complete control over that as a user. And you can scope the secrets to users and environments and the result as template strings at runtime. So you can see kind of on the screenshot to the left, we have say a secret called DP password that's set for the CI environment, another secret with the same name, DP password, but for the preview environment. And these will have different values. So for instance, if you look at the Garden YAML below, you see we're consuming these secret values from the secret map, which is available to Garden Enterprise users. So that means if you do something like Garden deploy Postgres in, say, the CI environment, DP password will be resolved to one value. If you run the same command, but in the preview environment, you'll get a different value. And you can also scope these values to users. So like it kind of the order of precedence is just like secrets in general, down to the environment level and down to the user level. So for instance, here we have kubeconfig set for both myself and Jon in the demo environment. And that means that we don't even need to have those credentials on our laptops. And if you just run Garden deploy, first of all, Garden bundles kubectl. So by running a Garden command, it will pull down, my credentials when I'm deploying Jon's credentials when he's deploying. So like, in terms of onboarding new users, for instance, they can literally get started in a single command if you've already set up the credentials for them in Garden Enterprise. And it also does environment management and like I mentioned, integrates with your VCS system. So yeah, it runs workflows on VCS events, and you can view the logs and results in the Garden Enterprise UI. And you can see an example of a workflow here to the left in the Garden YAML kind of screenshot. Name of the workflow is cleanup. And you can see kind of in the trigger section. So when you close a pull request, Garden Enterprise will respond to that event and run this particular workflow in the preview environment. And you notice that in the workflow, we're actually consuming a AWS secret access key so that Garden Enterprise or the pod that runs this can authenticate against your environment and say delete it when you close the PR. And this is one example of a Garden Enterprise workflow. For instance, you can see you can deploy a preview environment when a PR is opened and delete it when the PR is closed. And similar to the demo I'll be showing you later. And we're planning on doing a lot more on that front end, with both cleaning up namespaces automatically and just environment management in general. And I get a little bit into that towards the after the demo. But I think I'll just wait. Let me see. Yes, more demo. That's the next slide. So let me see. This is the Garden Enterprise. This is our demo server where Garden Enterprise is running. This is kind of the front page, the projects page, and you'll see we'll have two projects here. One is called Vote Demo, the other is called Demo Project. Vote Demo is what I'll be showing you today. And what you're supposed to do, you click the Add Project button here, and you add the project through a VCS integration. So again, GitHub or GitLab is what we support currently. And what then happens is that Garden's going to scan these projects for Garden.YAML repos. It will create a project based on name, sorry, for Garden.YAML config files, and it will create a project based or create project based on the Garden.YAML files it finds and create environments, as you can see here for these projects. Here's the here you can set secrets per project, and you see here like I mentioned before, there's scope to either an environment or an environment and a user. So going back to the project screen, click here, and you'll see this is the list of namespaces for that particular project. So in the project we have three environments: dev, preview, and CI. And dev is just fixed. So if you do a Garden deploy and using a dev environment, it's just in this demo dev namespace. Preview environments get created as part of the internal workflows that I mentioned before. When Garden Enterprise responds to a VCS event, and the names there are based on the PR number. And finally, you have kind of the ephemeral, we call this the CI environment, ephemeral namespace that runs your tasks and gets deleted or cleaned up after you run it. So it's these three different environments for different purposes, and just going to show you what that looks like actually. So if I switch to my terminal and I'm going to run a workflow that's called deploy preview environment. So all that does really is just a workflow that deploys an environment, and I set the environment to dev as opposed to preview or CI, which is what it's built for, and it's hard code the namespace. So I'm just doing this so that a new namespace gets created as we deploy this. So if you see, I'll hit enter here. It will run this workflow called deploy preview environment. And if I refresh my screen, I should see that already here. That's the webinar namespace that's just getting created. And you can see here, like, these are the steps to the workflow in question. So you can click here, you can see the logs. So Garden streams the logs, in this case from a laptop to Garden Enterprise, and I can see that that this all builds and deploys successfully. And I can see test and services, and you can see these are all the services that got deployed as I ran that command, and it also displays like the link URLs to your ingresses. So you can, for instance, click into here, and this is the project in question. So the project I was just deploying is our Vote demo project that we've used for ages, and by running this command, it gets deployed. So and this is the UI, how it looks. And if I now go ahead and say change this, and for context, this is a super simple example we stole from somewhere. It has a few services. There's two front-end services for some reason, a backend called API, and a few other services. It's like a prototypical, like simplified.
It's like an old Docker Compose thing that we translated to work with Garden maybe 2 years ago.
Yes,
correct. We should get on this. We say this every time, and then we never actually do.
We say that every time. In our defense, we're too busy making nice features, but we should really prioritize making this a little bit nicer. But yeah, okay. So to get back to the demo. So this is the voting app. And say the voting app company, it pivots, and instead of making people vote between vote tabs and spaces, it'll be cats and dogs, say. So I'm just making this change, and so the idea is here that I'm going to add this change, add this change to my version control system, and I'm going to push this to GitHub. Let me see. And once I do that, I am going to create a pull request for this particular change. So this goes back to the workflow I was talking about earlier in the slides of kind of, creating preview environments and also, of course, running tests when you push to GitHub and then deleting or tearing down these environments once you're done with them. And you'll notice, maybe just real quick, show you the workflows that we have. So I'm switching back to my VS Code for the workflows. So we have all of our workflows in a single workflow file. This one is called full task. It runs all tasks, like, so it's database. It's a little bit more expensive, so we're actually not using that currently. But this is the unit workflow, which is a little bit snappier, as the name suggests. As you notice, like, here are the triggers. Here we set the environment. So on pull requests, Garden Enterprise is going to run this set of steps in the CI environment. So you'll notice it will start by setting up the cloud script just to authenticate against the project cluster, run a unit test, and then once that's done, it's going to delete the environment, clean it up. And you'll notice here on GitHub that the GitHub checks page updates. So I think you just click into one of these, and it's both running the deploy preview. Yeah, so the second workflow that runs at the same time is the one that deploys the pre-environment, and that one doesn't get torn down right away, and we template the name of, or the PR number, into both the environment name and the environment host name, so that this kind of lives with the PR. So that's kind of the idea behind this workflow, that you have your test running, in an ephemeral namespace that gets torn down, and then, for designers or whoever else wants to see kind of the result of the work, they can look at this. And they can look at the kind of the preview environment that sticks around for the lifetime of the PR. So if you click here, it takes you straight to. Oops, was that the wrong link? Right. So this is the test namespace in question. So you see it's running the tests, and it's going to run all the tests with the unit test. So it's first going to authenticate, and then run one test at a time. And finally, once the test passed, it take a while. I think we're spinning everything up from the namespace didn't exist before, so we had to create the namespace and then deploy all the things. And once that's done, it's gonna tear down this particular ephemeral environment. And then there is the demo preview 96. So that must be the one from my PR, assuming it's PR number 96. And you say it deployed the preview environment. So it did that already. It didn't run in test, but it deployed my services, I would hope. And now if we check out the Vote Demo app, whoops.
Oh no.
This demo is live, by the way, as you can tell. You're supposed to see the updated version. Not quite sure what the issue here is. Might be some conflict. Oh no, it was the wrong namespace. Here we go. This is the one we're looking for. Okay, so I was looking at an older preview environment. So the reason actually you're not seeing this one is because we already closed that PR, and then that environment's been taken down. So it is actually working as expected. I was just looking at the wrong one. So, but now this is currently deploying all things. This takes like a minute to set up all the things, and it will deploy the project to the pre-environment. Looking back at kind of the workflow, the deploy step is. You see, so it's going to deploy it in this preview environment. It's going to set the host name. So you notice we're templating, using the templating syntax to put the preview environment is like demo, preview, and then the PR number defaults to null if that's not found. And that's both going to be the host name and the name of the namespace. And once this is ready, it's taking a little bit longer than I thought. It takes a while to deploy all the things. We should be able to click into this and actually see the updated results. I think the previous one was tabs versus spaces. So if you just give this a few seconds, it's gonna, yeah, there you go. So both demo, that's the result. No, that's this one. So clicking through here, and this should give us, fingers crossed. Yes, cats and dogs. You forgot to change that. It's the button names, but you get the picture. So now the idea, this is going to live with the as long as the PR, and you can share this with your team, your designers, or whoever else is interested. And then next time I'm going to push to this environment, it's actually not what we recommend is the next time you push the environment, you again run, say, your unit or integration tests, and as they pass, then we recommend you would run the workflow or the command that updates the pre-environment. That's this is how we set things up on our end. So we're actually using Garden Enterprise to develop Garden Enterprise, or to dog food Garden Enterprise, and also using Garden Core, of course. So what we do is every time we create a PR for the first time, and it will run your tests and create a pre-environment. And then every time you update that, like you force push or you push onto that PR, what's going to happen is the tests are going to run again. And once they pass, then we redeploy them in pre-environment. So you're also guaranteed to have like a working preview environment with a fixed URL, fixed namespace name, so that your designers don't have to bug you for a new URL every time you push. And
maybe one thing to mention there. So because Garden is aware of the running environment, when you push an update to a PR, and you only change one service, or you change one little bit, so it only affects a single test or something, only that test will rerun. We should actually incorporate that in the demo at some point.
Yes.
So a second push to the same pull request will be working against the running environment. So it will only update, redeploy what needs to be redeployed. There's a test result cache. So we only retest what is actually affected by the changes. And that's where it starts to come in really handy. And that's both applies when you have your own development environment continuously running, obviously, but also if you're iterating on a pull request, you don't have to wait. Especially, if something goes wrong, and you forgot you needed to change one line of code somewhere, you don't have to run the full battery of tests, the whole pipeline from start to finish. It will only just do the incremental update, same as when you're using Garden normally.
Absolutely correct. Like I mentioned before, like this particular project is composed of a few examples. Few services. And when we deployed this earlier, it had to build and deploy all of the services. But now next time around, if again you push, like say you make a change to the Vote front end, this is going to be cached, JWorker, Postgres, Redis. These things will all be built and deployed, so it should only take a few seconds. You'll also notice here that once the endpoints, once the services have been deployed, you get this nice little table in your GitHub UI where you can click directly to the links of the preview environment. So you can access this both, of course, just through the Garden Enterprise UI, or you get it directly kind of in the context of the pull request, which is super useful. And then eventually, once you close this pull request or merge it, for that matter, a second workflow is going to run that's going to tear it down. So after all this, we're left basically with none of the namespaces that belong to this particular PR. And that segues, I think, nicely into. So there's some manual work involved in both tearing down the namespace and handling the closed event and doing all the templating. So it segues nicely into kind of the next slide and our Q4 roadmap, where, among other things, we want to focus on making the whole environment management part much better. Maybe hand that off to you, Jon. I know that you've
sure
put a lot of thought into this.
Yeah, I mean, I think. I mean, it's not a terribly complicated thing to explain, but it's a high value feature, and it's something that we've been asked for a lot. Basically, well, I think especially when you have lots of developers, like not just your CI pipelines spinning up namespaces, but you have a bunch of developers who are creating their ad hoc dev environments. The resource sprawl is something everybody asks about, and it can become a concern. But because Garden has a little bit more context than typically a CI system does, we know like when a developer was last interacting with a namespace or an environment, and with I think I suppose the big thing really, like, the difference between Garden Core, the Garden Core is a CLI that you run from your laptop. You run it from your own CI, but there isn't a persistently running service. It's collecting all this data about how you're using your different environments. And both of these features on the slide here are really us leveraging that. And basically, we have information about when environments were pushed, what the status is on them, when were they last interacted with, and the feature might have actually will maybe in a month we'll actually show it in action, but we could have shown a screenshot from the settings just to kind of describe that better. But basically, so what you can do is decide for all dev environments or all CI environments, after an X amount of time, you want to either stop all the services within the environment or delete the whole thing, delete the namespace, etc. And stopping the services basically means like, putting like, replica 0 on all the deployments, etc. And we can do that automatically based on a TTL, based on last activity, or on a fixed schedule. So, if your team is all on the same time zone, or roughly, you could do it every night, for example, at a certain hour, or every Sunday, or whatever is convenient for you. And basically, this scheduler runs persistently, is checking the environment status throughout the day. And again, on the kind of just having all this information about how you're using Garden. One thing that's lacking in Garden Core is like there's not a lot of, we can't like track historical usage data. So historical data about like all your different builds and all your test runs, how long deployments have taken. There's a lot of valuable insights you can gain from that. For example, and so we're starting to build in like insights and analytics based on these records. And the questions that we can help answer are which builds are, or which parts of the stack graph are slowing your workflows down the most. Is it the fact that you're always rebuilding this on every push, or is this one particularly slow build, or this particularly slow test? So we can kind of help find the bottlenecks and kind of give you sort of a heat map of your stack graph, and then you can see histogram of individual test runs, individual builds. You can see if they're getting slower over time, and yeah, I mean, and just very much open to ideas. Like these are kind of things that seem obvious to us, but there's a lot of interesting things you can do with a combination of the stack graph, knowing the structure of your application, as well as the historical data of all the different workflow runs and builds and deploys and tests and everything. So we're just getting started on that, and we will be gradually adding more and more analytics and insights over time. Yeah, I think that just about covers that. And then there's like I suppose we're kind of deliberately just talking about the Q4 roadmap. This is like right in front of us, very close to release. Next time we can talk about like what's a little bit further down the line, like workspaces, for example, where you can actually run Garden from Garden Enterprise, so you don't actually have to have Garden on your laptop either. But we can get into more details a little bit later.
Right. Yeah, I think that's at least the end of the demo. Oh, and it's the Q&A section.
Yeah, and actually, I decided there's one more thing I wanted to show. So, right. Ether, if you could stop sharing, I'll go ahead and share my screen instead. So, give me just a moment to get it going. So, one thing that we've been working on, we're starting to think about. We've been using Slack for a while now for support for open source Garden, and it generally, like works well at least most of the time, but there's some things about it that aren't ideal. So first of all, really difficult to search, find previous answers, and so anytime we answer a question that might come up over and over again, going to be really tough for a new user to find a previous answer, get what they're looking for more quickly. And also, if you're completely new to Garden, none of what's on Slack is available, like indexed in a search engine. So if you're searching for answers to questions, you're going to have to first get to the Slack and then again probably ask the same question again. And so we've been thinking about other things we can do and built sort of a first version of a forum, a support forum, and just sort of a prototype, I guess. And obviously nothing much in here yet, but wanted to just be a sort of the go-to place for asking questions and conversation, like getting help for Garden. We still want to think about the sort of the right balance between Slack or more real-time chat, which I think still certainly has a place in how we all talk about the project. But just wanted to let you know this is something we're working on. It is up at community.garden.io, but we haven't started using it yet, haven't rolled it out, so to speak, via the Slack channel. But wanted to put it out there, and I think we're just really interested to hear feedback more generally over time about like the best way to handle open source support for Garden Core, and think about what we can do that scales well. And I think being able to have a nice repository of answers is a huge part of that. So just wanted to mention that. And again, we'll post something in Slack once we've had a chance to build this out a bit more. But with that, can go back to Q&A. So get back to the slides now. Here we go. All right, so I think just one other question that had come in. So had a question that came up during the Garden Enterprise demo, and I think it has to do with security. And so it's a question about like devs, want devs to be able to interact with environments like the staging environment, but without them literally having the credentials on their laptops. And so how could you approach that with G? Like, what are the options that you have there?
Yeah, so this is well, this is actually like this probably kind of part of the motivation. So I mentioned workspaces there in passing earlier. So and that's a feature that's meant for a few more things really, but it does mean that. So basically, a lot of companies don't really want any sort of like authentication keys on their on laptops, and that's been kind of blocking the wider adoption. So basically, like there's we have users and customers who only run Garden from their CI pipelines and don't run it from developers' laptops because they just, for IT policy reasons, can't really do that. So yeah, that question makes perfect sense. I suppose I couldn't quite parse from the question whether it was more to do with like specific environments, like if you want to access, what was it, like you mentioned, like a staging environment,
right.
Yeah, that you would otherwise not have access to. Not really quite thought about like how best to solve that, but in a broad sense, workspaces are meant to solve this general thing where you don't actually want, you maybe have certain users who don't, like you may have PMs or something. Some of our users have like PMs spinning up preview environments. They don't really want to have Garden running from their laptops, so it's convenient for them to be able to spin up a workspace. Essentially, like it's analogous to code spaces or any number of those code sandbox tools where you basically spin up a pod in the Garden Enterprise cluster that is pre-authenticated so you as a user are pre-authenticated with Garden Enterprise, so you can get all the secrets and everything from there, and that could include like Kubernetes credentials. You can bootstrap it with a script, and I think need to think a little bit about like the specific use case of giving a user that otherwise wouldn't have credentials for a staging environment a workspace pod that could work with that. But I think that feature should evolve to support something like that. But initially, it was meant more for like, you know, just me, and with my credentials, I just want to run Garden remotely as opposed to in my terminal on my machine. We can, you know, that's good food for thought, but we can get more into that maybe next webinar or the one after.
Cool, sounds good. And yeah, and that was it. So no other questions, and so we can go ahead and start to wrap things up, coming up to close to the end of the hour anyway. So yeah, if you want to stay in touch for announcements about future webinars and releases and so on, you can register or subscribe to our newsletter at garden.io. There is a place to subscribe in the footer of the site. If you have questions about Garden Enterprise or working with us more generally, you can go to garden.io/contact, and there's a form you can fill out, or you can send an email to hello@garden.io. And yeah, everyone who registered will be getting an email with a recording of this webinar in the next 24 hours or so. And last thing I'll say, of course, is that we are hiring. And so you can go to join.garden.io, which will now redirect you to garden.io/careers, a new careers page. And so have some openings there if you're interested. And I think that's everything we've got. So thanks to everyone who came tonight, and we will see you at the next one. Bye, everyone.
All right.
Right.